This is going to be my preview for the Ravens-Texans matchup in Baltimore in Week 5. I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to waste your time and talk a whole lot about the Ravens defense. It's really not worth it for you or for me to try to project how Baltimore is going to defend this Texans team or any NFL offense for that matter without so many starters. Awuzie as an outside corner has been playing well, generally, except that kind of weird push-off play by, I think it was Worthy last week that ended up being a big completion. Roquan looked off last week in Kansas City, in my opinion. His reads were inconsistent. He's out for a while. Humphrey's been playing well below his standards in 2025, if you ask me. Hamilton somehow suffered an injury in practice on Wednesday, and he's questionable. I have my own thoughts on whether or not we should let him go, depending on the nature of that injury. But in any case, I'm going to focus on the other side of the ball. The Ravens offense, without Lamar, is going to go against a very fast defense that D'Amico Ryans brings to Baltimore. It's a very systematic and fundamental defense, in my opinion. I think the Browns have a more dominant centerpiece, right, in Myles Garrett, and a more focused style, one high safety structure, a lot of man-free coverages. The Chiefs, on the other hand, have the big game pedigree, right? The defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo, their history of causing Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense problems. Although Lamar did play quite well in Week 1 of 2024 against Kansas City in the loss. And then last week, despite all the chaos, he had some moments on the first possession and then 2 drives late second quarter and into the third quarter where he had big throws and we were able to get field goals. This defense for Houston is very well trained. They have 2 pass rushing staples in Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, and those guys cause problems. That duo has 7 of Houston's 11 sacks. From the film that I have watched, they can change the game in a moment's notice. On the outside, from a corner's perspective, Derek Stingley, Kamari Lassiter, they obviously are quality corners. Stingley is the better reputation among the entire league for good reason, right? He's a great player. He's very smooth and smart. Hasn't been as much of a playmaker in the NFL as he was his freshman year at LSU, but generally regarded as one of the best corners in the league, and I would agree with that. Lassiter is very underrated in some ways. In the 2 games viewing on my part, of the 2 games that I charted and saved plays of, he's very intelligent in zone, got great awareness of the route distribution. Jalen Petre is a very versatile nickel defender who has been used as a blitzer in the past against the Ravens. And I do wonder, given our inability to handle stunts and blitzes, how Houston plans on attacking our pass pro or even blitzing to stop the run. Lamar won't play this week, of course, but he's been sacked 15 times to open the 2025 season. I think at this point, we know who Lamar Jackson is. He's established how he can play over the course of an 8-year career. He was sacked 23 times in 2024, so that's a good number. I think it was 3rd least in the league from a starting quarterback standpoint. And then dating back to 2019, he was also only sacked 23 times that year. 15 times through 4 games is a huge number. It's an outlier. It should jump out to all of us. The integration last year in 2024 of Derrick Henry was slow, at least early on. His involvement was inconsistent, very similar to what it's been so far this year. Our willingness to rely on Henry early in 2024 and early in 2025 almost kind of really matches up. We were better in pass pro in 2024. Why? I think we were in more advantageous 3rd down positions. Going into Week 4, the game against the Chiefs last week, we were 30th or 31st in the league in terms of yards to gain on 3rd down. I think the average was 3rd and 8.4 for Baltimore. Feel free to let me know if I'm off by a little bit there. I don't know how that number has changed for this week, but to my eyes, it was very similar against the Chiefs. The O-line and Monken to this point have not established a consistent run game. And that's even with Henry, looking great in terms of yards per carry at 5.8. He's also top 10 in the league in total rushing yards, but he does have the 3 fumbles, and 2 of them are huge, right? The losses to the Bills and the Lions, those fumbles in the 4th quarter, change the dynamic if they don't occur. I don't know about you, but it doesn't surprise me that this O-line is having issues. These are the same issues we had last year, slightly different in terms of the pass pro, and I'll talk about that a little bit. My reason for discussing the Ravens' inability to commit to the run game or unwillingness to do so is the more 3rd and 8s we're in against this Houston team, in particular with Cooper Rush on the field, the worse this is going to get. We're not handling defensive tackles well in the run game. We're very unreliable as an offensive line in terms of combos, getting up to the second level. I got news for you. If all we're talking about is linemen getting to the second level, absent how that happens or when it happens, we really don't understand how blocking schemes work in the NFL. If we leave to go up to the second level too soon, and the guard or the center that we're working with, or even the tackle, doesn't have adequate leverage, and the defensive tackle makes a tackle or a stop within 2 or 3 yards, that's a loss. That second level block really doesn't mean shit. We're weak at the offensive line position from a physical strength standpoint compared to the defensive tackles that we face on a regular basis, that we're trying to block, that we're assigned to block. We need combo blocks at guard, center, guard. All 3 of those guys, including Linderbaum. We need combo blocks, and not just immediately moving up to the second level because that's our job. We need to help out our tandem because physically, from a strength and explosiveness standpoint, we're at a disadvantage if you take all 3 of those guys into account collectively. Now, to talk about the Ravens pass pro and how it could match up with this Texans defensive line, specifically Anderson and Hunter, but they've got really good defensive tackles too. 91 is out. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. From a Ravens perspective, I personally don't care who's at fault on some of these snaps. But to act like this offensive line, all 5 of them are operating anywhere near a high level, that's just a pretend fantasy that we're living in. If you look at the film of the 4 games, the Ravens offensive line is not very good. And that whether that's the coaching of Warhop, I do suspect that plays a role, or the actual talent level of the players we have on the field, that's a related factor. Our starting guards are not complete players. If you combine the 2, maybe they would be. But it's just not operating from a reality perspective to think that Falele and Voorhees are going to go out and play 55 to 60 snaps per game without, at minimum, 4 to 5 glaring mistakes or missteps that open us up to negative plays. And now we've got to go into a game without Lamar. I'm certainly not painting a bright picture here. And I get it, Cooper Rush is surely going to require a change in the game plan. My suspicion is that Monken will go with more under center run concepts and then some play action associated with it. The Texans are very sound in coverage on the back end, the 3rd level of the defense. I think they might be the most balanced defense we will face, along with the Chiefs, in that they are capable of stopping or slowing down your run game, and they also get to the quarterback while having high-level coverage, whether they're in man or zone. That's what I mean by balanced. They can shift between man and zone, 2 high safety look, 1 high structure, and stop or slow down your run game while being sound against the pass. Even with Lamar on the field, a healthy Lamar, I think this Houston team is a worthy challenger from the defensive standpoint. I'm omitting their offense totally. That side of the ball is quite terrible. That's obvious. They're only averaging 16 points per game. So if you're reacting or overreacting to perhaps to what I'm talking about, I'm only discussing the Ravens offense against this Texans defense. We have a ton of position player talent on offense, and we can still get things done. And I get it. There's some people who are somehow disappointed, even though we're almost averaging 33 points per game. I would say that Harbaugh is the main guy who seems to be a little out in left field from his reactions or lack thereof to our defense while talking about and focusing on the offense so much this week. Houston's only allowing 12.8 points per game. They had a shutout last week against the Titans, and they also held the Rams to 2 touchdowns in that Week 1 loss. So even with Lamar, I think it'd be a great matchup. The Texans play a high-level brand, a brand of defense I think that D'Amico Ryans is probably proud of. We would surely be favored if Lamar and so many of the defensive starters were healthy, but I'm not sure that, let's say that the Ravens were favored by 4.5. If a 1-3 Houston team is coming to Baltimore in Week 5, I'm not sure I would tell you to take that bet to give away 4.5 or 5 points. Because at this point, this looks like the least prepared Ravens team we've seen since 2021, at least to my mind. And that was partially due to a string of crazy injuries in the preseason. J.K., Gus, Marcus Peters with the ACL. We also lost Ronnie Stanley that year after Week 1. and then had a number of defensive back injuries, including Marlon Humphrey, that put us in a compromised position late in the year. Lamar also went out later in 2021 after taking 38 sacks. Now, we can sit up here in week 5 and we can make excuses about injuries if we want to, and I guess some will. But the bottom line is this team has not been ready to perform at the level they need to in order to win early in the year, and it's for the second season in a row. Now, if Henry doesn't fumble against the Bills in week 1, if Buffalo, don't get a deflected pass for a touchdown to Keon Coleman, yeah, we might win. But we have to remember context or other plays that were related to it. So, for example, Buffalo had 2 wide-open wide receivers on previous plays, and they could have capitalized on those. We sometimes, misremember things, or we only remember one play and don't operate from the totality of what occurs in a game. We're just not capable of finishing off good teams right now. The Lions physically manhandled us at home 2 weeks ago. They sacked Lamar 7 times. Last week was a complete meltdown on both sides of the ball. But in the second quarter, we somehow had leads of 7-3 and 7-6 to the Chiefs. We gave up 17 points on defense. To illustrate how bad that is, look at Kansas City's scoring points per game in 2023 and 2024. They've scored 30 or more points in those 2 seasons exactly 4 times across 34 regular season games. The Chiefs had not scored above 22 points in going 1-2 so far this year against the Chargers, Eagles, and Giants. So 4 times in a 37-game stretch, they had scored 30 or more. We gave up 17 in one quarter, the second quarter, and then 20 in the first half. We're a mess defensively. We've got no direction. We don't appear to have anything that we can commit to, that we can do consistently to limit offenses. Harbaugh, in his public statements to me on the defense, sounds clueless. I would hope he's more angry, frustrated, authoritative, or maybe even trying to take charge behind closed doors. I'm not sure if he's capable of that. I'm not sure if he's capable of helping out that side, because it's the second year in a row we've been utterly prepared to begin a season. John Harbaugh presumably is in the building every day. He says he sits in on meetings. He shouldn't be sitting in on defensive meetings. He should be running them as the head coach. That entire side of the ball is unacceptable. And the reason why I bring all that up, even though I said in the beginning I wasn't going to talk about our defense, is it's unacceptable. The Texans have a head coach, D'Amico Ryans, that I believe calls defensive plays, or at least he's heavily involved. They have a system. It's oftentimes predicated on a 4-3 structure, but there's some wrinkles that they present. I will be honest with you, I only saved cut-ups, which means edited plays, from their 26-0 win over the Titans last week, and then the 17-10 loss to the Jags. I also have the Bucs game, where they gave up, I believe, 169 yards rushing, and I've watched it, but I wasn't able to cut plays or edit it like I did for the other 2. So here's some observations, some things to look for. They've got a system. They do use 2 different 5-man fronts, one from a 4-3 structure where they walk up one of the inside linebackers, and another where they legitimately have 5 defensive linemen on the field. I do wonder if Monken wants to see that group, basically get Jalen Petre off the field, if he can. Go 12 and 13 personnel. We've got no Ricard available, so I know we're limited in our options, and that really could not come at a worse time, because we've got 2 physical defenses coming up with high-pressure D-end outside linebacker types, right? The Texans and then the Rams. Now, I guess Ronnie Stanley is going to suit up, and at this point, I think it's been put out there that it's his left ankle, again, that's hurt. I thought it was the right, to be honest with you, by the way he was dragging his right foot in pass pro before checking out of the Chiefs game last week. First possession, I don't think he looked great, but he didn't look like he was dragging it much. There was some type of collision, I believe, on the second possession, and then I think he's out by the third. Perhaps I had my drives or possessions wrong there, but you get the point. He played last week when he was, coming in with, perhaps an injury that was severe, and it only worsened last week. He's questionable for this game as I record this early Saturday morning. I expect the Texans to stay balanced on defense. They'll queue up some pressures or blitzes, but they don't need to use some of the ones the Lions and Chiefs deployed, right? They don't need a 3+1 spy against Cooper Rush. They really don't have to bring extra pressure on us with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. They've also got a real aggressive and nasty group of defensive tackles. So the blitz structure might look different this week, and I expect that after this game, win or lose for the Ravens, there'll be overreaction from people on social media, Ravens fans and others. But generally, I'm talking about people outside the Ravens fan base. Look how they didn't blitz Cooper Rush. Look at the difference in how they played, and they'll attribute that to something with Lamar. It's because Cooper Rush isn't athletic, number one. Number two, hopefully it's because we get the run game going and there aren't that many opportunities to rush the passer. I think that the inside linebacker for Houston, I think it's Al-Shaair. He might be the most athletic, quick inside linebacker we've faced. Not technically sound all the time, but and his production doesn't stack up with other players across the league. But this defense has a really good group at inside linebacker. Besides Al-Shaair, who leads the team with 28 tackles, they've got To'o, who's right there with him. He's got 26 tackles and a sack. They've got a competent backup that would start for our team at will linebacker, and that's E.J. Speed, formerly of the Colts. Those three guys are quick. They play well against screens. I think they're very smart as second-level defenders. They flow really fast to the football. We got to get guys in their face. We've got to find ways to get offensive linemen or tight ends up on them, but not so quickly that we leave our partner, our tandem, on combo blocks to handle a defensive tackle or D-end that they're athletically at a deficit against. That second-level group, along with Jalen Petrie, I should say, they flow really fast to the football. They've got a very balanced defense, meaning they don't overcommit to the run, whereby that opens themselves up for the pass or big plays even more. As I said earlier, they kind of operate out of a two-high shell more often, but go one high occasionally and roll someone down, especially if you put twins into the boundary. They're not afraid. They're one of the teams that plays nickel, or when they play a nickel defense, they're willing to take Jalen Petrie and drop him down into the boundary, stay in a two-high structure, and then when a team motions the receiver across, they don't always roll one high. It's somewhat unpredictable. Interestingly, they recently released C.J. Gardner-Johnson, a safety who had some good moments on film against the run, and it sounds like locker room issues that he was a part of were a large factor in his release. His play against the pass would be my guess that was one of the biggest factors of his release along with those issues. They generally do a good job against the run this season, although Tampa Bay did run for 169 on them. Overall, Houston's allowing the lowest points per game through 4 games, and that's not a fluke. We've played well against the Texans, this D'Amico Ryans team, right? Winning 25-9 in week 1 of 2023, C.J. Stroud's first game in the NFL, and then 34-10 that season, right, in the AFC divisional round at home. Then last year down in Houston, the 31-2 masterpiece. I think they were really a broken offense at this time. Their offense doesn't look much better. Nick Chubb is starting for them. Mixon is out. These teams are clearly on different ends of the spectrum. It's their offense that's struggling versus our defense is struggling, right? So clash of the non-Titans there, if you will. I wanted to focus on their defense versus our offense because, well, when I started watching film earlier in the week, didn't know if Lamar was going to be out. Knew that he was hurt in the Chiefs game. Probably came into the game hurt, to be honest with you. I know that there's a lot of people out there outside the Ravens fan base who are saying he faked an injury and all these things. That's ridiculous. And we can tell now that it was legitimate. The Texans have a very prepared defense. And one stark difference between their group and ours under Zach Orr is communication. They communicate across the second and third levels of the defense. You can see it on film. The comparison is obvious. They're constantly talking, constantly giving hand signals. Guys aren't turning their face mask to look at each other and say something. They're communicating with hand signals, and their face mask is still looking in the direction of the offense. That's a key point for me in terms of trust. I don't need to look over at you to say something. I know you can hear me because we're constantly communicating every play, and I already understand the crowd noise or lack thereof, and I think that's a key point here for early in the game. Ravens need to get something going on special teams or defense or offense, get the crowd into the game, and try to remove their ability to communicate. We are, in my opinion, absent crowd noise, absent some big play early that kind of engages the Ravens fans, we're in an uphill battle. Unless or until Monken and find a way to get playmakers in space, right? And Derrick Henry looks like an obvious candidate here for high usage. I think anytime he gets 18 to 20 carries, then you can expect him to pop one or two big runs. How do we get that done? I don't have confidence in our offensive line, and I recognize that you if you tuned in this far, you certainly don't want to hear that. Should we utilize heavier personnel groups in the under center run game? Maybe. I might advocate for going that route at times. I certainly don't think we're going to go spread them out and go 11 personnel to throw, even though we've got great position player talent at wide receiver and tight end, obviously with Flowers, Bateman, Hopkins, Andrews, and Likely. The problem for me there with that strategy would be O-line consistency. It's a huge risk factor against a team that doesn't need to bring 5 or 6 to get pressure. In a general sense, in my opinion, the more we are in that operation, or that situation, I should say, 11 personnel, shotgun, obvious throwing down, the more we are at risk of negative plays. Maybe we screen them some. That looks like a way to possibly get some yards out on the edge in space or to running backs. And since Monken showed up in 2023, the Ravens screen game drastically improved. It was horrible before then. I do have 5 or 6 examples on film, however, of the Texans defending screens quickly and really getting guys to the football. It's a fast, physical team that's not normally outflanked, to be honest with you. In fact, one thing to mention is they've defended trick plays quite well. 3 so far this season. 2 against the Titans last week that were snuffed out immediately. There was a flea flicker where Hunter gets a sack on Cam Ward, and then an attempted double pass or throwback pass to Cam Ward in the first half again that Hunter covered up. Basically, Hunter covered Cam Ward, and the receiver or the running back had to run out of bounds. I think it was Pitre and Al-Shair that were on the tackle. My point is, and you can probably tell at this point, don't expect anything like the 2024 game at all. I would not think that's a high probability to happen. It's a different offensive coordinator for them. 31-2 game doesn't sound within a high probability range to occur. Do I think their offense is very good? No, even though they have C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, Joe Mixon's not played, but Nick Chubb is there. He's certainly capable, even though I know he's injured. He's always had big games against us. I don't think they are producing, and it shows on the film, right? That's obvious. It shows with the statistics as well. Here's what I did for this game, and keep in mind I started Tuesday night in my study. I would record plays from the defensive possessions for the Texans, and then let the offense plays flow through. I have the full-length game film, by the way. So, 90 seconds, 2.5 minutes between defensive possessions, I'm maybe writing down some notes or typing on a second screen. And one thing I will say is, usually in my procedure of doing that, I can reliably get my notes done on the previous defensive possession while the same team has the ball, while the Texans have the ball in this case. That wasn't the dynamic here. There was many times I had to pause the full-length film because the Texans were already punting, or they had multiple penalties, and I could tell, okay, this possession should last longer because of the penalties, but I knew it was going to be a 3-and-out or a 4-and-out with an added play in there for a penalty. Stroud has 3 interceptions. He's been sacked 10 times. I think the Ravens defense, if we had everyone available, has the opportunity to get right and play a little bit better here. Defensive play early would really help out the crowd and this team. Special teams as well to get us off track. I'm not sure that we want to stand here and get in a slug-it-out game. I don't know. We certainly want to get in a shootout. We have Derrick Henry. I think we should use him. I think we should ride that horse as long as we can. Yes, their run defense is going to be physical. They'll probably stop him for periods of time. Pitre is to me an interesting player. I've always thought he was a high-level guy. I recognize that others don't have the same opinion, but we can get him off the field if we want to by going with 12 or 13 personnel. If we had Ricard available, that would be a 22 personnel dynamic, and we could get their base 4-3, or sometimes they're going to go with that 5-2 look. Denico Autry is out. He's an older but still productive defensive end that they were able to bring on board last year. Anderson, I think, is a real matchup problem for Rosengarten. I don't believe Rosengarten has played well this year, and Anderson looks to me like he's a guy who could cause him problems with his athleticism, the multiplicity of the moves that he can offer. Rosengarten seems to be making mistakes both in pass pro and the run game. To me, it's clear that Falele and Rosa, regardless of what we think of each of them individually, collectively, those two next to each other, number one, is a bad pairing. And number two, I believe that other NFL teams are looking at the film and saying, that's a side that we can attack. As well as some of the interior blitzes that teams have run in the last 2 or 3 weeks. The Lions and Chiefs kind of showed us some of the blueprint. I don't know how that will work if we're in 30 to 32 plus passes this game. I think we're in trouble of falling to 1-4. Getting the running backs to 25 plus carries, maybe even upwards of 30, 32, somewhere in that range, seems like a good place to start. A couple of other suggestions or thoughts. Shorten the game. And so it's not just running the ball more to shorten the game. It's also your third down call. Keep in mind, when you're going to punt or kick a field goal, perhaps. If you punt while the clock is running, or you kick a field goal while the clock is running, that can assist with shortening the game. How much does it shorten the game? Maybe not by as much as I'm making it sound like. But my point is, if we're in a low percentage situation on 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7, or we only need field goal attempts, then we can run the ball on 3rd down or throw a safer pass to allow the clock to continue to run. I think besides Derrick Henry, it would be great if Keaton Mitchell was out there on the field, an opportunity to bust big plays every time he touches the ball. Justice Hill, get those guys involved. I think a huge play by the offense, maybe a score or a long run or pass early, would be a spark. It's critical to me that Monken has a great game plan here, gets us off to a good start. We could presume that early in the week, well, we shouldn't assume, but we would hope that early in the week, while the coaching staff was making their game plan, they were game planning for if we have Lamar and if we do not. To me, the game plan should have been similar anyway, because if Lamar was going to play, he would be dealing with an injury. I think he's been dealing with an injury all season, dating back to possibly training camp when whoever stepped on his foot. I really don't care, but someone did. And then against the Bills, he took 2 huge shots from Oliver and also, sacked 7 times, a hit multiple times against the Lions. It reminds me somewhat of the Chiefs' first Super Bowl game against the Eagles, where Mahomes, I believe, comes into the game hurt, doesn't really do much from the standpoint of production. He did have a really great scramble in the 4th quarter while being hurt. I believed that leading into that Super Bowl win, Andy Reid and his staff made a game plan to win the game with or without Mahomes, meaning let's prepare as if he may go out during the game and get hurt and be unavailable to us. If you recall, I believe I have the correct Super Bowl in my memory here. At the end of the 2nd quarter, he gets tackled, limps off, and then somehow comes back and finishes the game. And, of course, they beat the Eagles. Hopefully I'm not misremembering, and that was this 49ers Super Bowl. I don't believe it was. My point is the Ravens coaching staff hopefully planned to that level. Hey, how do we win the game with Lamar? How do we win the game with Cooper Rush? And then how do we merge those two game plans so that the teaching, the practice, the instruction this week is smooth and there's not too much for our guys to handle, because we haven't prepared with Lamar on the field. I think getting points this week is critical. The interception Lamar threw last week against the Chiefs it's an even bigger play, in my opinion, looking back on it now. We need points in that situation, up 7-3, but we need points against this Texans team that's only giving up 12.8. Special teams play has not been great for Baltimore this year. Harbaugh is a former special teams coordinator, head coach in his, I think, 18th year. We should be better. We should be better prepared globally, right? To briefly finish with my overall thoughts, if Monken can find a way to mitigate the pass rush, either through limiting the Texans' opportunities, running the ball better, or screens or reverse, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for trick plays. The Texans are so fast and so well trained. They seem to react to it early, react to it well. A defensive turnover early or multiple sacks, I should say, would spark the home crowd and hopefully put us in a better situation. I'm not saying I think the Ravens are going to lose. I don't really feel like I do a good job of predicting scores anyway. How do we win this game? I mean, certainly it looks like a game that you could hold the Texans offense down on, but how do we say that about this Ravens defense? We've been horrible defensively. If we could get a young player to make an impact early, a Martin, presumably who's going to play, Buchanan, Starks would be huge, or Mike Green. If either one of those guys got a pick, a strip sack in the case of Green, a fumble recovery, maybe that gets taken back to the house, that would be massive in front of the crowd. That I'm sure is pretty disappointed, just like I am so far. Getting the home crowd into the game early somehow is important. I wouldn't advocate for trick plays against this team consistently, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Ravens come out in something slightly irregular, even a Henry Wildcat type situation on the offensive side. In any case, that's kind of my preview for the Ravens-Texans matchup. I do have some film. I'll try to share it on Twitter and in the Ravens Discord that we operate. That's very active and also been obviously very disappointed and negative this week, myself included. We should be. The Ravens are too talented to be 1-3. Schedule difficulty doesn't matter to me at all. They've got a lot of talent and have every right, every opportunity to win games in the 2025 regular season, regardless of who they play. And now we're in a situation where we're trying to win a game without our best player. I appreciate you guys' time. If you tuned in for this preview, please let me know what you think of it in the comment section. Forgive me for not showing film, but to prepare film for a preview is negative in two ways. Number one, it takes a lot of time to get that prepared. Number two, the videos have not performed well in terms of previews for Ravens game. I'll just be blunt. When I have prepared film and tried to give people things to look for. So this is a much easier platform for me to produce something. And so if you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comment section. If you did not, feel free to let me know as well. Appreciate you guys' time.